I'm going to tell you something that will save your life. And I'm going to tell you something else that will make you hate me for about 30 seconds before you realize I'm the only person in your orbit who respects you enough to say it. But the second thing, the one that will rearrange the way you see every single person sitting at your dinner table, I'm saving that for the end. You'll earn it, or you won't. Either way, I'm done carrying people who refuse to walk. Last Wednesday, at exactly 4:15 in the afternoon, my daughter Clara called me sobbing. Not the kind of crying that comes from grief or loss or anything that would justify a grown woman of 55 dissolving into liquid on the phone. No, her credit card had been declined at a luxury furniture store. She wanted me to wire money instantly so she wouldn't have to stand there in front of some sales associate feeling the weight of her own choices. She wanted me to bleed so she wouldn't bruise. And I said 2 letters that shook my entire bloodline. No, not no, but let me see what I can do. Not no, not right now, maybe next month. Just no. A period at the end. A locked door. A woman reclaiming herself at 80 years old. And you sitting there watching this. You think that was easy. You think I hung up the phone and felt liberated, like some movie scene where the music swells and the credits roll. No, I hung up and my heart pounded so hard I thought my chest would crack open. My hands were shaking. I felt heat crawling up my neck like I'd committed a crime, because that is what the system does to women like me. It wires guilt into our nervous system so deep that saying no to our own children feels like we're betraying our ancestors. But I'll tell you what's a real betrayal. Dying broke in a county facility with fluorescent lights buzzing over your head while your children redecorate their living rooms with money they sucked out of your retirement. That is betrayal, and I refuse to be its victim. You want to know how I got here? You want to know why an 80-year-old black woman had to build a fortress around her own bank account to survive her own family? Then stop scrolling, stop multitasking, because this isn't entertainment. This is the blueprint they never wanted you to have. 3 days after the phone call, my 2 adult children and their spouses showed up at my house. Not to check on me, not to bring me flowers or food or ask how my knees were holding up. They came with glossy brochures for a beach house in Malibu. $60,000. They'd already picked the dates. They'd already divided the bedrooms. They'd already decided how my money would be spent without asking me a single question. The excuse was beautiful. I'll give them that. We want to make memories with the grandchildren before it's too late, Mom. Before it's too late. You hear that? That's not love talking. That's a countdown. They were already measuring the distance between me and my coffin, and they wanted to make sure they squeezed every last dollar out of the gap. I sat at the head of my own dining table, and I looked at each of them. My daughter Clara, who has mastered the art of tactical tears. She can cry on command like a courtroom actress, and she deploys my grandchildren like shields every time she wants something. The kids will be so disappointed, Mom. The kids won't understand why Grandma doesn't love them enough. She weaponizes those babies. She turns their innocence into a crowbar and uses it to pry open my wallet. Her husband is an executive who can't execute anything except excuses. His salary should cover their life, but Clara's appetite is designed for a budget that doesn't belong to her. It belongs to me. Then there's Julian, my son, 52 years old, and still chasing what he calls once-in-a-lifetime opportunities. Every 6 months, there's a new venture, a new startup, a new investment that requires just a small injection of capital, Mom, and I'll pay you back triple. He has never paid me back, not once, not a dime. And when I started saying no, Julian didn't get sad. He got strategic. He started making phone calls to attorneys. He started whispering to his sister that maybe Mom isn't all there anymore. Maybe Mom's mind is slipping. Maybe we need to look into her mental capacity. You understand what I'm telling you? My own son tried to use the legal system to label me incompetent because I stopped being convenient. That is what happens when you build your children on the foundation of unlimited access to your resources. The moment you cut the supply, they don't grieve the relationship. They attack the source. But before I tell you how I dismantled their entire operation, and I did dismantle it, piece by piece, with surgical precision, you need to understand the lie that's been running your life. The lie that motherhood at this age means you owe your body, your savings, your peace, your sleep, and your sanity to people who will visit your grave once a year if you're lucky. The system, and I call it the system because it's not an accident, its architecture, depends on black women like me staying in the role of the silent engine. We build, we fund, we sacrifice, we hold together families that would collapse without our labor, and in return we get a title, matriarch. Strong black woman, grandma who never says no. You know what that title actually is? It's a leash dressed up as a crown, and I took it off. 5 days after I refused to finance their fantasy vacation, Julian brought a man to my house, Dr. Aris Thorne, a geriatric specialist. 50 years old, polished, soft-spoken, the kind of man who smiles while he slides the knife in. Julian said it was just a friendly visit, a casual chat over tea. But I've been black in America for 8 decades. I know what a setup looks like. I know when a room is being staged. So I made a phone call of my own before they arrived. When Julian and Dr. Thorne walked into my library, expecting to find a confused old woman they could evaluate and diminish, they found my corporate attorney sitting in the leather chair next to mine, with a legal pad and a recorder. Dr. Thorne's smile disappeared so fast, you'd think someone had slapped it off his face. Julian couldn't even look at me. Because that's the thing about family predators. They only operate in the dark. The moment you flood the room with light, with witnesses, with documentation, they scatter like roaches. That doctor was there to build a case. He was going to write a report suggesting that my refusal to distribute money was a sign of cognitive decline. Frontal lobe deterioration, paranoia, emotional instability. The system has a name for every form of resistance a black elder shows. You stop giving, you're delusional. You set boundaries, you're hostile. You protect your assets, you're paranoid. They have pathologized our sovereignty. They have turned our self-preservation into a diagnosis. And families, your own blood, will use that machinery against you if you let them. I did not let them. If you're done being a doormat for people who only love you when your wallet is open, type strength in the comments. And if you can't type it yet because your hands are shaking with recognition, that's fine too. That shaking means the truth is landing. Let it. Day 7. Clara pulled her last card. She called me and said in a voice so cold it didn't even sound like my daughter anymore, "The grandchildren won't be coming to your birthday if you keep this up." She said it like she was reading a verdict, like she had the authority to sentence me to loneliness. And for about 4 seconds, I felt the old programming fire up, the panic, the guilt, the voice in my head that says, fix it, give in, they'll leave you alone, they'll abandon you, you'll die with no one around you. 4 seconds. That's how long it takes for a lifetime of conditioning to try and override your logic. But I had spent those 5 days preparing. I had read my medical portfolio. I had reviewed the projections my health manager put together for the next 5 years. The therapies, the treatments, the costs of staying alive and functional in a body that has been weathering this skin for 80 years in a country that was never designed for my comfort. Every dollar I gave to Clara's furniture habit or Julian's failing businesses was a dollar stolen from my own survival. So I told her something she will never forget. I said, I would rather spend my birthday alone, in my own house, with my own money, in my own peace, than buy the attendance of people who only show up when I'm paying admission. She hung up, and the silence that followed was not empty. It was ancestral. It was the sound of every black grandmother who wanted to say that sentence and couldn't, who swallowed it and let it rot inside her chest until it became cancer or a stroke or a quiet death in a back room nobody visited. I said it for all of them, and I will not apologize. Now here's where most people stop. They think the victory is in the speech. They think saying no is the finish line. It's not. Saying no is just the alarm clock. Waking up is the easy part. What you do with the rest of the day is what determines whether you survive or get dragged back into the bed. So I didn't just say no. I made it structurally impossible for me to say yes ever again. I sat down with my attorney and my financial advisor, and I built what I call the Steel Fiduciary Shield. I transferred discretionary management of every liquid account I own to an independent trust officer, not family, not a friend, an officer bound by contract and law with one set of instructions. No disbursements to third parties unless it's a verified critical medical emergency or direct primary education expenses for a minor. That's it. No vacations, no furniture, no startups, no investments, nothing. When Clara called again, and she did call, because people like Clara always call, I didn't have to wrestle with my emotions. I didn't have to fight the guilt. I just pointed to the contract. I would love to help, but my asset management agreement prohibits personal gifts above $1,000. I removed myself from the equation. I turned my own weakness, my love for my children, into a structure that couldn't be manipulated. I used bureaucracy as armor. I forced my family to interact with me as a woman with boundaries, not as a bank with a heartbeat. And here's what nobody tells you about this kind of move. It doesn't just protect your money, it protects your health. And I don't mean that in some vague motivational way. I mean your actual cells, your blood, your immune system. I spoke with my physician about what chronic guilt does to a body at my age. The stress of constantly being pulled apart by people who feel entitled to your resources. It degrades your telomeres, the caps on your chromosomes that determine how fast you age. It inflames your coronary arteries. It floods your system with cortisol until your immune cells start attacking your own organs. Every time I said yes to something that made me feel sick inside, my body was literally breaking down. Psychoneuroimmunology, that's the science of how your emotions shape your immune function. And the research is brutal and clear. People who cannot set boundaries die faster, not metaphorically, clinically. Their T-cell production drops. Their inflammatory markers skyrocket. They become susceptible to every disease that preys on weakness and stress. So when I say your survival depends on learning to say no, I'm not being dramatic. I'm being diagnostic. You are killing yourself with compliance. You are dying one yes at a time, and the people you're saying yes to will be just fine after you're gone. They'll find another source. They always do. But you won't get another body. You won't get another chance to protect the years you have left. And those years belong to you, not to your daughter's taste in furniture, not to your son's delusions of entrepreneurship, not to a system that measures your worth by how much you bleed for others. I take magnesium threonate every morning for cognitive clarity. L-theanine before every confrontation to keep my nervous system from betraying me. I protect my body the way I protect my accounts, with discipline, with science, with the cold understanding that nobody is coming to save me. I am my own rescue, and you need to become yours. Now, I promised you something at the beginning. The thing that will change how you see every person at your table. Here it is, and I need you to hear it with your chest and not just your ears. The people who love you the most are not always the people who need you the most. And the people who need you the most are almost never the people who love you the most. Read that again if you have to. Write it on your bathroom mirror. Tattoo it on the inside of your eyelids. Because the moment you understand that need and love are not the same currency, you will stop bankrupting yourself trying to purchase affection from people who are only renting space in your life. Clara doesn't love me less because I said no. Clara loved what I provided, and when the provision stopped, the performance stopped. That's not a daughter grieving. That's a customer losing a supplier. Julian doesn't miss his mother. Julian misses his funding source. And when he realized the funding was locked behind a legal wall he couldn't climb, he stopped calling. Not because he was hurt, because the transaction was over. My fortress is quiet now, and I don't mean quiet like lonely. I mean quiet like a battlefield after the smoke clears, and you realize you're still standing. I wake up in my own house, paid for with my own money, managed by my own decisions. My grandchildren will come back when they're old enough to understand what happened, and if they don't, I will grieve that loss with the dignity of a woman who chose herself, finally, irreversibly, without apology. So here is your assignment. Think about the last time you said yes to someone and felt something inside you collapse. Think about the face of the person you said it to. Think about whether they noticed you were breaking. And if they didn't notice, if they just took what you gave and walked away smiling, then you know exactly what you're dealing with. That's not family. That's extraction. Comment below. When was the last time you said yes and felt yourself dying inside? Or better yet, when are you going to say your first real no? Because I promise you, on the other side of that word is a version of yourself you have never met. She's been waiting. She's been watching you give yourself away piece by piece, and she is tired of waiting. Your survival depends on this. Not tomorrow, not next week, now.